Ash of Kingsbane. Chapter 1. The Saffron Fog. Fog drifted in from the eastern tide, thick as honeyed milk, gold lit by the dying sun. It reached the harbor before the bells of the watchtower did, curling around the moorings and lantern posts like something sentient. On the furthest pier, where barnacles outnumbered men and even gulls avoided the air, a ship floated black-hulled, scorched near the prow, its flag missing. No crew called out, no oars dipped, only the low creak of wood surrendering to tide. From its hold came a figure. He did not stumble. He did not rush. He moved as one who had long since learned that haste solves nothing. His cloak, threadbare and steeped in strange oils, dragged behind him like a second shadow. Upon his back was a satchel lined with brass hooks, alchemist symbols etched faintly into the leather. In one gloved hand, he held a cane of smoked yew, in the other, a small jar sealed in wax. He passed the customs booth. No one stopped him. The guards had abandoned their posts an hour before, choking on a miasma they could not name. And so he walked into the city unchallenged, bearing illness or miracle none could yet discern. The man was Doctor Aldren Vale. The city of Teralune was old. It sprawled like a spider's web between sea cliffs and the great crescent gate, its towers rising not in defiance, but in contemplation. Stone bridges arced over canals, and lanterns swayed from high ropes, casting gold over marble and grime alike. The people spoke many tongues here, but in hushes. Teralune listened. It had long memories. That night, it smelled of saffron, salt, and something burnt. By the time Aldren reached the street of white thorns, the fog had thickened to the point where buildings became silhouettes and footsteps echoed twice. Behind shuttered windows, the dying coughed like rusted hinges. Outside, signs hung crooked, closed by order of the guild. Plague watch zone, blessed are the pure. He paused at a crooked door painted with 3 crimson nails, the mark of abandonment. The wood beneath his fingers was soft with rot, but it opened. Inside lay darkness, and the scent of opium. Not the raw bloom from the southern groves, nor the perfumed resin sold in noble dens. This was sharper, eastern, the kind that came in black tar cubes wrapped in silk, kissed with powdered stone and secrets. Kingsbane, Aldren lit a taper, not with flint, but with a snap of fingers and a twist of glass. Blue flame leapt to life. There were 3 within. 1 was dead. The other 2 would follow before dawn without intervention. He knelt beside them, unhooking his satchel with reverence, and laid out the tools of his unholy craft: tinctures, stones, needles of bone, a brazier of silver. He whispered as he worked, not prayers, reminders, ratios, the order of things. Heat before moisture, cut before seal, breathe last. The smoke that rose from the brazier was not of this land. It curled green and gold, with edges that shimmered like beetle wings. As it filled the room, the dying ceased to moan. Their eyes opened, and though they wept, they did not scream. From the corner, a figure watched, small, thin, eyes like polished coal. A child. "You are the smoke man," she said. Aldren did not look up. "I am what is left. You brought the demon." He paused. "No," he said, too late to make it truth. By dawn, the fog had thinned, but the fear had not. Word traveled swiftly through the vine web of the city. A foreigner, a healer, a conjurer, he walks in smoke and brings sleep to the dying. Some wake, some do not. In the cloister of Thornvale, high above the city, the bells rang 13 times, once more than the laws allowed. Brother Thane opened the lantern book. His finger traced a passage never meant to be spoken aloud. Where the ash walks, truth burns. Send the light. And thus the hunt began. Chapter 2: The Lantern and the Leech. Atop the highest shoulder of Teralune, where the wind carried neither salt nor soot, the monastery of Thornvale crowned the cliffs like a stern brow above furrowed eyes. Its walls were slate-colored and silent, broken only by slits of amber-lit glass and ivy that clung like faded wounds. No birds nested there, no bells rang freely. Inside, the air was cool and dry, perfumed faintly with old vellum, oiled wood, and the ghost of incense long spent. Brother Fane knelt alone in the hall of observance. His frame, lean and deliberate, held stillness the way a vessel holds water. The candle before him had burned down to a pool, untouched. His eyes were closed, but his ears had opened to the 13th toll, a sound forbidden, a knell beyond order. He rose without sound, fastening the sash of his habit and reaching for the lantern that marked his rank. It bore a flame of soft green, cold-burning, fueled by soul-root oil. A lantern-keeper's light meant not for the lost, but for what hunts the lost in places men fear to tread. As he passed through the nave, Sister Elva emerged from the shadows. "They say he walks in fog," she murmured. "That the sick rise, smiling, that his breath is not his own." Thane did not slow. "Fables flourish when reason flees, and when reason flees, then we follow." She handed him a scroll sealed in red wax, the mark upon it, the tri-thorned sigil of the High Archon. "His name is Aldren Vale," she whispered, "returned from the Eastern Reach. Scholar of flesh, addict of ash." Thane accepted it wordlessly. Outside, the wind tore down the cliffside and swept his robe around him like a funeral veil. The city stretched below, a web of secrets and scars, and now, if the signs were true, a haven for the unclean flame. He descended with the sun. The street of white thorns was worse than the scroll had promised. Where once fine houses lined the stones with carved facades and wrought iron gardens, now hung sheets of mildew and rope barriers bearing the sigil of plague. The dead were carted by lamplight. The air was thick, cloying, not with rot alone, but with a sweetness that lingered behind the teeth. Kingsbane. Thane moved as a shadow between grieving mothers, grim physicians, and watchmen who flinched from his lantern's glow. Twice, he saw symbols scratched into the walls, circles within circles, thorns with eyes, a mouth devouring its own tongue. He stopped at a door nailed shut, 3 crimson nails. Inside, he found a room still faintly glowing with the memory of incense. A brazier had burned here, not hours ago. Bones of cinders still curled at its heart. On the floor lay 2 cot mats, recently disturbed, and a smear of soot where fingers had pressed for balance. He found the jar beneath the table. Sealed in wax, the residue within shimmered gold and black. He recognized the scent before he opened it. From behind him came a voice. "You will not find him with nose and candle." Thane turned slowly. A child stood in the doorway, thin, bright-eyed, familiar. "You saw him?" She nodded. "He took the smoke into the sick," she said. "They stopped hurting. But one saw a demon. Said it wore a crown of soot and teeth. Said it smiled like it knew him." Thane knelt. "And you? Did you see it?" The child shook her head. "Not then, but I dreamed of it later." He looked down at the jar. The ash shimmered. Where the ash walks, truth burns. He took the jar, the child's words, and his lantern, and walked into the city's hungriest dark. Chapter 3: Cures and Cravings. In the grey hours before dawn, the alleys of Droskwater fumed with a reek of wet stone, tallow smoke, and something new, something not yet named by the people, but deeply known in their blood. The scent of Kingsbane clung to the laundry lines and pooled in the gutters as if the air itself had begun to dream. At the edge of a broken square stood a tenement leaning like a drunkard into its neighbor. Upon the roof, its shingles patched with hammered tin and ceecloth, sat Doctor Aldren Vale, cross-legged, unmoving. Beside him, a brass dish burned with a lazy curl of ash smoke. Children watched from a safer roof across the alley, silent and wide-eyed. Below, the dying stirred. Word had spread beyond the street's naming. The man who came in fog, who fed the plague not medicine, but incense and murmur, who walked between fever and shadow and did not flinch. They came to him now. Crippled and coughing, blistered and hollow-eyed, they gathered by the dozen, drawn not only by desperation, but by a strange peace. A woman crawled through the press. Her son was limp in her arms, face flushed and breath rattling like coins in a jug. Aldren did not descend. He pointed to the brass basin, to the brazier already lit. She understood, or rather, the ash within her blood did. She laid the boy beside it. The smoke enveloped him like a shroud. For a moment, nothing changed. Then the rattling ceased. His lips parted. A sigh, slow and deep, left him. Then he began to hum, a tune no one recognized, yet all felt they knew. The crowd gasped, then fell reverent. A whisper passed from one mouth to the next. He sings in sleep, the death song, the healing song. Aldren closed his eyes. He did not smile, not this time. Elsewhere, behind heavy doors and pages of trembling script, the Guild of Leechwrights convened. Their hall, high in the Silver Quarter, smelled of chartreuse, dried bladderwrack, and ink older than reason. Its ceiling was painted with the constellations of humors and sigils of lawful cuttings. Men and women in grey robes, each marked with the brass pin of seniority, sat in judgment around an empty chair. "His credentials are valid," rasped one. "His methods are not," snapped another. "Kingsbane is forbidden. It unbinds the spirit before the flesh is ready. He heals, he damns." The Master Chancellor of the Guild, an aging woman with veins like map lines across her temple, said nothing for a long while. Then she lifted a page from the dossier, a report from a midwife in the Drosswater. A boy humming in his sleep, a woman cured of black lung, a merchant who woke laughing after 4 days in death throes. She set it down. "Summon him, quietly. If he complies, we watch. If he refuses, no one ask what followed if he refused." That night, Aldren sat within a ruin that had once been a perfumer's shop. Glass still glittered in the dust, catching the light of his brazier. The room smelled faintly of lilac, charred silk and memory. He watched the flame as it bent and danced, consuming its ribbon of resin. He was clean-shaven now, his hands washed, his cuffs unrolled. The ritual, as always, before taking the ash himself. He inhaled. The world softened. The walls fell away like theater cloth. His body vanished, and in its place, 1,000 organs of the past, heartbeats he had silenced, breaths he had returned. He saw the face of his mentor, long dead in the sands of the Eastern Reach. He heard the scream of a child in a burn house, the scent of lotus milk, the sound of chains. And then, a voice. "You are becoming more than healer." He turned. The figure sat across from him, not emerging but already there, hooded in black, limbs too long, fingers tapering into curling wisps of soot. "Grigoral, you offer peace," Aldren whispered. "And yet, I see only shadow. I offer what they beg for," the demon said, tilting its head. "A kindness too long withheld. I numb, I soothe, I listen." Aldren's hands shook. "You eat, you feed on the need." "Yes," said Grigoral. "And so do you." The lantern sputtered. The vision broke. Aldren coughed once, staggered upright, and extinguished the embers. Behind his eyes, the melody still played, the song of the sleeping boy, carried now by the silence. 3 more came before the dawn. 2 left whole. 1, smiling, did not wake. The ash had chosen. The craving had begun. Chapter 4. Ghosts Beneath the Veil. Brother Thane stood before the reliquary of withheld saints, hands folded behind his back, brow knit in quiet fury. The chamber was not meant for visitation. Its doors bore seals of judgment, and the air within had not stirred in decades. But the Archon himself had granted access, whispering the phrase that opens such tombs where doctrine blinds, memory sees. Dust clung to the corners like old regrets. Wall shelves held scrolls wrapped in gut string and wax, their symbols half warned, half erased. Statues lined the edges of the circular chamber, robed in cracked marble, their eyes covered by veils of iron. The lantern book had mentioned little of what he sought, only this: the demon Grigoral feeds upon that which soothes. Beware the gift that numbs before it cures. Its name will come in ash. And now it had. From the 6th alcove, Thane withdrew a codex bound in flayed bark. Its pages were brittle and fragrant with deathroot. He placed it upon the central plinth and opened it with reverence. The script was not temple tongue. It flowed in slashes and curves, mimicking flame. A dialect from the Reach, the same symbols that marked the jar he had found in the abandoned tenement, the same language whispered by the dying boy. He translated slowly. We gave it breath when we burned our fear. We crowned it when we begged for silence. Grigoral, Lord of the Leech Song, did not arrive. He was called. Thane exhaled. The candle beside him hissed. Outside, thunder rolled. It had not rained in Teralune for weeks. That same evening, Aldren Vale wandered deeper into the Droskwater. He did not return to his former perch, nor to the perfumer's ruin. The ash had spoken too clearly there. He needed silence, distance. He found it in the cellar of a weaver's hall, where the looms had long since rotted, and the air smelled only faintly of moth and thyme. He set his brazier carefully, did not light it. Instead, he unwrapped the journal bound in oilskin, inked with his own hand over years of wandering treatises on the medicinal use of serpent root, musings on breath fever and brain rot, and entries written during the darkest stretch of the Scorch Rebellion. Pages torn by tremor. Pages smeared with blood, not his own. He turned to the back. There, carefully transcribed, were the dreams. They had begun in the Reach. Visions during ash trances, figures robed in fog, children dancing in graveyards, a throne made of masks, and always a voice, seductive, sorrowful, knowing. He traced a sentence penned a year ago. The ash remembers what I would forget. A knock broke his reverie, not loud, not hurried. He opened the cellar door to find a courier boy, pale, breathing through a cloth. You are summoned, the boy rasped, and held out a sealed letter. Aldren took it. The wax bore the sigil of the Guild of Leechwrights. High above, in the monastery, Brother Thane prepared for descent. He donned the raiments of intercession, robes of midnight blue with thread of silver and a lantern hooked at the shoulder. His hands were bandaged in memory cloth, inscribed with the oaths of witness. He descended alone. He would find Aldren Vale. He would speak the name Grigoral aloud and see whether the man still claimed ignorance. The ash was thickening, the veil thinning. If there were truth to be found, it would lie beneath the silence where memory burned and demons listened. Chapter V. The Guild's Tongue. The halls of the Guild of Leechwrights did not echo. They absorbed sound, as if the stones themselves preferred secrets to proclamation. Built in the high crescent with vaulted ceilings of bone-white limestone and inlaid brass veins, the guild house was a sanctum of silence and science, where whispers carried more weight than sermons. Doctor Aldren Vale stood in its central chamber beneath a dome of stained glass depicting the four humors in war. His cloak was neatly folded over one arm, his satchel untouched. He had not lit his brazier since entering, though its absence weighed upon him like a hand across the throat. The guildmasters regarded him from their elevated chairs, 7 in total, each old enough to remember the last purging of heretical methods. They sat behind a crescent table of blackwood, upon which were arrayed their seals, scrolls, and a single iron bell. None had spoken for some time. Finally, the Master Chancellor rose. Her name was Virel of the Needle, and she had not practiced surgery in 20 years, yet her name still bled fear across the city's back rooms. "You have brought healing," she said, her voice dry as parchment, where others brought burial. Aldren bowed his head, not in deference, but in acknowledgement. "You have also brought unlicensed tinctures, unapproved rituals, and a substance exiled from Guildhall record under writ of binding. Do you deny this?" "I do not," Aldren replied. Murmurs stirred among the others. The Guildmaster of Herbology scowled. The eldest, Master Rune, tilted his head as though examining a foreign parasite. Virel leaned forward. "Kingsbane is not medicine. It is a sovereign's indulgence, banned for its capacity to mislead suffering. It heals with a lie. It heals with clarity," Aldren answered, "and with consequence. That is no lie. The ash is addictive. So is pain." The room stilled. For a moment, all that moved was the drifting dust beneath the dome's colored light. "You were trained in our method," Master Rune spoke now, slow and ancient. "Bloodletting by degree, roots of measured potency, the balance of bile and breath. And yet you invoke reach law, incense, demon flame. How do you justify the betrayal?" "I justify nothing," Aldren said quietly. "I only save those no longer counted worth saving." He reached into his satchel and drew forth a sealed scroll. "These are my records, dosages, symptoms, dreams. The song of a boy whose lungs had collapsed, yet who sang in sleep after the ash. Explain that by humor alone." He handed it to an attending scribe who passed it upward with trembling fingers. The guildmasters perused it in silence. Pages turned. Breath caught. Virel did not look at the scroll. She watched Aldren. "We cannot permit open use of the ash," she said. "Its roots pierce too deep. Its smoke draws things we were never meant to study." Aldren met her gaze. "Then study me." The words hung in the air. He continued, voice slow and sure. "I do not walk in shadow. I do not peddle miracles. But something walks behind the ash, and I will not retreat before it. Let me continue. Let the guild observe. Deny me, and I return to the alleys alone, unguarded, and watched by darker eyes than yours." The bell was not rung. Instead, Virel gestured once. A steward stepped forward and placed a sealed document upon the table before Aldren. "Provisional status," she said. "Restricted. Observed. You will submit weekly records. If one dies by ash, you will be held responsible." "Understood." "And if demons answer your summons, they already have," Aldren replied. He left the hall in silence, footsteps swallowed by stone. Behind him, 7 masters stared into colored light and wondered whether they had permitted salvation or something worse. Outside, the dusk deepened. And in a street below, Brother Thane watched the Guildhall from beneath a hood, his lantern dimmed. He had heard the name Grigoror spoken in the reliquary. He would hear it again soon, and when he did, he would be ready to answer it. Chapter 6: A Hollow Cure. It began with the boy. His name had been Giron, though none recalled it by the time the story reached the upper tiers of Teralune. They only spoke of the Ash Child, the boy who laughed without breath and danced without light in his eyes. He had been among the first brought to Aldren after the fogs. Struck with marrow fever, skin taut with fever glow, he had thrashed and whimpered for days until Aldren fed the brazier, set the measures, and bade the child breathe. And he had. He had sighed and sung and smiled. But now he wandered the alleys in the blue hours, barefoot, humming to stones and shadows. He did not respond to his name. His mother, stricken with guilt, had tried to drag him home. He bit her, then vanished. By dusk, the watch found him kneeling in a ruined fountain, hands red with blood, not his own. When they asked what he had done, he smiled and said, "I was showing the song." Aldren stood over the child in the quarantine wing, his expression unreadable. The guild's observer, a young woman named Miren of Glasswood, stood beside him. She bore no lantern, only a codex and a quill of hawk feather. Her eyes missed nothing. "This is the fourth incident," she said. "I know. And the second to involve blood." Aldren turned away. "His pulse is steady. Lungs are clear, yet he is not here," Miren scribbled. "You speak as though the soul were an organ, something visible." "Everything leaves a trace," Aldren said. "Even what we cannot name." She watched him kneel. The boy blinked once but did not react. Aldren took a small mirror from his satchel and held it to the boy's lips. A faint mist. Life. Then he whispered, "Do you remember the flame?" The boy's fingers twitched. A low hum, tuneless, escaped his throat. Aldren drew back. They do not all return whole. In the canals below the Lantern District, Thane watched as a child's body was dragged from the water. Not Jeren, another. A girl, perhaps 8, missing for 3 days. Her skin bore no wounds, yet her face was twisted in peace. In her pocket, a folded scrap of silk infused with ash. He took it to the abbess. She frowned. "The demon's tithe grows bolder." "I do not think it takes by force," Thane said. "They offer. They seek it." "Why?" He hesitated. "Because the ash listens. Because grief has become heavier than fear." That night, Aldren lit no flame. He sat in silence, staring at the jar of Kingsbane. The brazier was cold, the air empty, yet he felt the weight of breath, not his own pressing against his thoughts. And then, laughter, not cruel, not loud, but layered. Laughter within laughter, like mirrors reflecting into dark. Grigoril appeared not in flame, but in glass. His shape coalescing in the curve of the jar, limbs twitching in impossible angles, smile wide and soft as velvet. "They sing your name," it whispered. "Even the lost ones. Especially them." Aldren did not move. "You promised relief," the demon said. "You gave it, and they have begun to pay." Aldren's voice cracked. "I did not summon you, you do, with every mercy, with every breath eased. That is how worship begins. I will stop." Grigoril tilted his head. "Then you will watch them drown in pain again. The mothers, the children, the songs will die in their throats." Aldren struck the jar from the table. It shattered. The image vanished. The scent remained. He fell to his knees, alone but watched. In the alleys outside, 2 more children slept beside a burned-out brazier, smiling in their dreams. And in the monastery above, Brother Thane lit his lantern and began to descend into the city once more. Teralune's sacred quarter, where domes of ivory rose like polished bone from the spine of the city, should have known peace that evening. The high bell of St. Viril was meant to chime only 7 times before Vespers, but this time it rang 8, then 9, then 13, each tone deeper than the last, vibrating through the marrow of stone and prayer alike. The priests faltered in their litanies, candles guttered. In the central nave of the Basilica of Lumen Sacra, acolytes dropped their censers and crossed themselves twice. The great glass-eyed statue of the prophet Maravin shuddered. Its bronze halo cracked down the center. A silence fell. Then the incense turned red. No hand had touched the burners. No powder changed. Yet the smoke, always pale with lavender and pine, now bled the color of dry wine. It swirled against the arches in twisting vines, thick with hidden shapes. Some claimed they saw teeth. Others saw crowns. The Bishop of Flame, Oran of Word, rose from the golden dais. His face was pale. Sweat beaded along the ridges of his collar. He raised his crozier and shouted, "Cleanse the air! This smoke is not of God." Panic stirred the faithful. Mothers pulled children from the pews. Elders wept into their veils. Still the smoke poured slow, deliberate, like breath held too long. The choir scattered. The bells ceased. And in that stillness, a single voice sang, a boy's voice. Soft, tuneless, familiar, Aldren's patient, Jeren. He stood atop the chancel rail, barefoot, hair matted with oil and ash, eyes half-lidded. His mouth moved as though caught in prayer, though no words came. Only sound. Only that terrible, beautiful hum. Thane was there. He had come to witness the rite, following rumor of a child seen near the basilica's steps. He pushed through the terrified crowd, past fallen altar cloths and overturned hymnals. His lantern flared green as he approached the boy. "Jeren," he said, not unkindly. The boy turned. There was no recognition in his eyes. The red smoke coiled around Thane's boots. Cold, slick, fragrant. Behind him, a monk screamed. One of the elder priests collapsed, frothing. The holy water boiled in its basin. Thane lifted the lantern. "I cast light into the mouth of darkness," he intoned. "Reveal thy name or flee." The smoke hissed. The boy screamed, not from pain, but from within the song, as if the melody itself burned in protest. And then the presence withdrew. Not vanished. Not banished. Merely stepped back. Jeren collapsed. Thane caught him before his head struck marble. The boy was burning with fever, yet ice-cold to touch. His lips moved. A name. Not Grigorol. Not Aldren. Only more. By nightfall, the basilica was sealed. Bishop Oran called for a full exorcism of the quarter. A proclamation was issued. All ash work is heresy. All who breathe its smoke consort with the hollow flame. Torches were lit along the temple walk. The watch was given sanction to arrest all found with braziers, resins, or unlicensed tinctures. Aldren, in his cellar, felt the shift like a knife drawn behind his ribs. The city had turned. Brother Thane, bearing the sleeping child, did not return to the monastery. He vanished into the maze of lower streets. And Grigorol did not speak that night. The demon waited, for silence to deepen, for fear to bloom, for the red vespers to echo again. From empty homes, from beneath the earth, a single bell, then two, then many, not in unison, but in answer. Teralune had no bells set beneath ground. Brother Thane knew this. And still he followed the sound. He had taken shelter with Jeren in an abandoned grain house near the mouth of the Saltwind Canal. The boy had not spoken since the basilica, but he had begun to draw, with chalk on the floorboards, with soot on the windows, circles, spirals, eyes upon thorns. Symbols the lantern codex had only hinted at, signs of summoning not taught, but remembered. Thane watched them by night and copied them by day. He sent the pages north with cloaked messengers, but no reply came. The order had gone silent. And still the bells tolled. A woman was the first to see them. She had been standing before a mirror, brushing ash from her sleeves, when the surface of the glass rippled, not with heat, but with hunger. Her own reflection twisted, her eyes darkened to pits. Behind her, a figure loomed. It did not move. It only leaned long, dry and crooked, like the bones of a great bird half buried in soot. Its limbs were jointed wrong. Its face was masked in wax, but from the mouth down ran a smile so thin it seemed carved. She turned, and nothing was there. But for nights after, she heard it breathing in the walls. The sightings multiplied. A merchant found a mouth whispering from the knot in his doorframe. It spoke his childhood name, forgotten by all but his mother. A nurse in the infirmary of St. Marim saw children with blank faces dancing on the roof. She fainted. Her hair turned white. A priest collapsed mid-sermon, blood seeping from his ears as he muttered, "They have begun to feed." These were not full apparitions, not yet. They were echoes, residues, shapes made from unmet hunger. The demons of want. They gathered where longing was strongest, by the bedsides of the grieving, in the cupboards of the starving, beside braziers still warm with Kingsbane. They did not speak, but they listened. Their presence was felt like a missing step in the dark. The watch refused to patrol after third bell, and in the south quarter a child vanished mid-sentence, simply gone. Her last words, "Do you hear the song?" Aldren read the accounts with trembling hands. He sat in a crumbling study once used by spice merchants, now draped in cloth to hide its windows. His brazier remained dark, the ash jar untouched. He knew what this was, not gregoral, not fully, but fragments of its hunger, given shape by those who had tasted relief once and would do anything to feel it again. The smoke had opened doors not merely to healing, but to haunting. He had not just soothed pain, he had left it hungry. That night, Brother Thane stood atop a roof overlooking the canal of mourners, his lantern guttered in the wind. Below, 7 figures moved in silence, cloaked, tall, limbs too thin, faces hidden beneath sacks of stitched silk. Each held a bowl of flame. No watch moved against them. No passerby spoke. Thane's breath caught as the 7th turned toward him slowly, as if sensing the gaze, though no eyes could be seen. And then it bowed, not mockery, not defiance, invitation. The bells cried out again, and this time the city did not sleep through the sound. Chapter 9, Ash Roots and Memory Wine. Beyond the eastern gate, past the stone-ribbed fields and frost-killed vineyards, the land turned old. Not merely ancient, but older than naming. The road that wound there was seldom traveled, etched faintly into the hills like a forgotten vein. Aldren Vale walked it now, his boots thick with clay, his breath clouding against the chill. No escort, no observer, only the silence of memory and the weight of necessity. The city had turned on itself. The ash was no longer a medicine. It was a mystery and thus a threat. But Aldren remembered where it began. He had not come to the Rootlands since the end of the Scorch Rebellion. It was there, among nomads of the Ash Desert, that he first inhaled the smoke under stars veiled in red, saw dreams that spoke, and heard names never meant for mortal mouths. They had called it Sakara, the blood of the patient god. A gift, a curse, a door. Now he sought its truth. He passed beneath thornwood trees, whose bark bled saffron sap, where birds did not sing, and even wind held its tongue. At dusk, he reached a hollow at the base of the Blackridge Hills, where old stones stood in a crescent, wrapped in vines and silence. There he waited. They came as shadows. Not spirits, not beasts. Men and women wrapped in robes of woven dusk, their faces marked with dust and bone. The ashroot tenders. He had not seen them in 5 years. He bowed. They did not return the gesture. "You breathe again of what we buried," said the eldest, a woman with clouded eyes and a staff of driftwood. I come not to claim but to understand, Aldren said. The city is unraveling. The ash is no longer content to soothe. She motioned, and he followed. Beneath the earth was a chamber carved from black salt, lit by bowls of low blue fire. At its center, the ash root tree. It did not rise like other trees. It coiled, like a serpent ascending in thought, its bark layered with names in hundreds of tongues. No fruit grew from it, only thorns, only scent. The same scent that had entered Teralune on the tide. He fell to one knee. The elder knelt beside him. You thought it merely a plant, a balm, but it remembers. Aldren stared. What does it remember? Mead, bargains, wounds never mourned. It is fed not by soil, but by offering. Then who first made the offering? She looked at him, and her eyes were no longer blind. You did. All of you. Every soul who begged for relief without reckoning. Every mourner who wished for silence more than justice. The ash answered, and behind the ash waits something that listens. The elder nodded. Not Grigorol, not yet, but the seed of it, the thirst of it. They shared a draught of memory wine then, a bitter distillate brewed from the sap of the ash root, mixed with vinifruit, blood petal, and dream mint. It tasted of regret. With each swallow, Aldren saw further. The first harvests, the torchlit rites, the day Kingsbane was burned, not for healing, but for escape. The moment smoke ceased to rise and began to reach. He saw Grigorol not as a demon, but as an echo called not from beyond, but from within. He awoke alone. The ashroot tenders were gone. The tree remained. He took nothing. He burned no resin. He returned to the city empty-handed, but no longer uncertain. Teralune was not cursed, it was answered. And the one who answered was still listening. Chapter X, The Demon's Lullaby. Night fell heavy over Teralune as Aldren returned, no longer walking, but drifting, as though each step untethered him further from the earth. The memory wine clung to his breath. The truths unearthed in the hollow beneath the Blackridge Hills echoed in every heartbeat. He entered the apothecarium quietly, sealed the doors, and lit no lamps. Only the brazier was kindled. The flame licked pale and thin as silk, fed not by Kingsbane, but by ashroot scrapings taken long ago, before guilt, before reckoning. He sat before it and waited. Sleep came quickly, or something like it. He stood in a hall of mirrors, endless, towering panes of glass stretched in every direction, reflecting not his face, but 100 versions of himself. Some younger, some older, some with blood on their hands, some weeping, one smiling with eyes that burned like polished obsidian. The flame behind him shifted, and from the far end of the mirrored hall came a figure. He did not crawl, he did not slither. He walked, shoulders squared, feet bare upon the glass, posture regal as a crowned prince. His robes were sable, trimmed in molten gold, the collar high and sharp. His hair was dark, falling like silk over perfect brows. His face was beautiful, painfully so. Lips curved in knowing kindness, eyes gleaming with secrets and seduction. No horns, no claws. Only a presence that bent the dream around him like gravity. Grigorol. He spoke not with growl or hiss, but in the low, lyrical cadence of a beloved song once forgotten. You finally drink without turning away. Aldren stood still. You have haunted me since the desert. I have accompanied you, said Grigorol, pausing to examine one mirror where Aldren knelt before a dying man. You opened the door, I simply remained. You are not mercy. No. I am the price of mercy, he said, voice smooth as smoke. And I am so very affordable. He turned, and his gaze settled upon Aldren with unsettling affection. They came to you because you listened, Grigoril murmured. You touched what the others feared. You gave them what even faith refused. That makes you more than healer. That makes you mine. I am no servant, Aldren said, though the words rang hollow. Nor am I master, the demon replied, smiling. I do not demand, I offer. A truth most will never tell you. The soul does not crave righteousness. It craves peace. And peace, Aldren Vale, is expensive. The mirrors shifted. In one, Aldren stood before the guild, crowned in ash and lauded as savior. In another, he lay upon a bier, surrounded by children singing. In another still, he watched Teralune burn, and he smiled. You choose what I become, said Grigoril, voice now behind him. Aldren turned. The hall was gone. He stood in the street of white thorns, empty. Until it was not, people emerged, hundreds each with eyes glazed, each mouthing silent thanks. They reached for him, touched him, clung to his coat. Behind them, Grigoril watched, arms folded, face aglow with approval. You are the lullaby, the demon whispered, the soft ending, the last kindness before silence. Aldren screamed, but in the dream it came out as song. He awoke with a start. The brazier had gone cold. The room was dark, but in the corner, where no wind stirred, a single rose petal of ash still curled upward, turning slowly, as if listening. Grigoril had not demanded his soul. He had only asked for consent, and Aldren could no longer recall whether he had given it. Chapter Xv, The Pact of Blue Flame. Dawn broke over Teralune as a smear of grey with no warmth to its light. The city had grown hushed, not from reverence, but from dread coiled beneath its stones. Merchants whispered of shadows that sang. The watch refused to enter certain quarters, and more braziers now burned in secret than in open defiance. Aldren walked through it like one condemned, though no chains bound him. He felt the lullaby even in waking. Grigoril's voice a lingering hum behind his thoughts. Each soul he passed bore the mark of hunger. Not for food, but for stillness, for forgetting. And the ash promised both. He reached the grain house just past 7th bell. Brother Thane opened the door before he knocked. They stood in silence, face to face beneath the threshold. One stank of smoke and sleeplessness. The other of cold lantern oil and iron restraint. I thought you would come, Thane said, stepping aside. I must speak with the boy. He is gone. Aldren tensed. Taken? Thane shook his head. He walked out on his own. Before dawn, left no word, only this. He handed Aldren a strip of cloth, ash-stained. Upon it, a single symbol, a circle of flame pierced by a downward thorn, the mark of the pact fire. Aldren paled. He is being led. By Grigoril, by the part of him that cannot let go. They did not part ways. They sat in the emptied grain room until dusk, speaking few words, sharing old knowledge. Thane read aloud the passages retrieved from the reliquary. Aldren showed the elders records from the root chamber. The demon did not come as tormentor. It came as lullaby, as longing answered. And if its shape is given by what we desire most, Thane said, then we cannot kill it by force. We must choose silence in place of song. Aldren stared at the lantern. Its flame had dimmed to a quiet blue. But they do not want silence. They want peace. And they do not care what sings it to them. Thane nodded. Then we must offer a brighter peace, one born in pain, not in escape. Then it will not be chosen. No, said Thane. It must be shown. They descended that night into the low quarter bearing no guard, no banner. At the square of the three-faced saint, they built a brazier of silver and lit it with lantern oil and root soot. No Kingsbane, no incense, only fire. Aldren spoke. He called out not to the city, but to its lost, those who had dreamed in silence. Those who had dreamed in silence. The false hopes. The lullaby. Then he told them what he had seen beneath the earth. That peace offered without cost is no peace at all. Some wept, others turned away. A few listened. One woman, frail, eyes hollow, stepped forward and dropped her ash jar into the fire. Another followed. Then a child. The smoke that rose did not sing. It hissed, it recoiled. For a moment, the air rippled. And all those near felt the hush, the moment where something leaned close to listen and passed by. The pact had not been broken, but it had been challenged. That night, Aldren and Thane walked the long stair back to the cloister. A lantern burned blue on Thane's shoulder. A second flame, identical, now hung at Aldren's side. Chapter 12. Embers beneath the temple stone. Remembers what the tongue forgets. It was said that beneath every holy site in Teralune there lay an older layer, vaults, catacombs, bones never sanctified and never spoken of. Brother Thane had read it once, buried in a marginal note in the Lantern Codex. The Basilica of Lumen Sacra rests upon a foundation laid by hands neither faithful nor forgiven. That sentence had lived dormant, like a coal under ash. Now it glowed anew. Thane and Aldren came cloaked and unarmed, each bearing a lantern burning with blue flame. A map, inked in wine and soot, guided them through a passage at the rear of the basilica. There the stone had grown brittle, and dust gathered in the corners like old regrets. The stair they descended narrowed until shoulders brushed stone. Dust drifted with each breath, and the air took on a weight that clung like the breath of long-sealed tombs. The chill deepened with every step, as if the very stones remembered a grief too heavy to fade. The first chamber greeted them with fractured saints and angels bound in iron. Their eyes had been hollowed, their posture slumped in defeat. The smell of sealed iron lingered, dry and sharp, like the hush before steel is drawn. They passed through a lead-sealed door, opened by a phrase Aldren had not spoken since the Reach. Let what listens, listen still. The stone yielded. The vault below spread wide, its walls carved with sigils older than any gospel. Thorn trees twined with serpents, eyes bloomed from open mouths. In the center stood a stone basin, its bowl scorched black with soot. 7 kneeling pillars surrounded it, shaped in the likeness of men. Each head bowed inward. Their arrangement resembled an act of prayer, yet the air carried no reverence, only the hush of suppressed need. Thane stepped forward. His voice was low. These were never saints. Aldren ran his fingers along the basin's edge. The soot shifted at his touch, releasing the sharp, earthen scent of unrefined Kingsbane. A phrase glimmered within the bowl. Peace is the price, pain the offering. Thane read it aloud. He stepped back, as if to let the words breathe. The ash wasn't made to soothe, he said at last. It calls. Aldren's hand hovered above the basin. Then something answered. Before the words could settle, a twitch passed through one of the kneeling forms. Stone fingers cracked. A breath escaped parched lips. A whisper. They still want. The figure's face began to fracture. The edges crumbled, worn away like stone left too long in rain. From within emerged a shape pale and yearning. No monstrous form, no snarling visage, only a face frozen in yearning, its mouth stretched wide and sightless. It reached forward, not with violence, but with the hunger of one who had forgotten the taste of rest. Thane lifted his lantern. The blue light met the apparition. It wept. Ash spilled from its vacant gaze, slow as snowfall. It made no sound. Its form trembled, then thinned into smoke. The traces curled across the floor and dissolved. Aldren stood motionless. These were the first, he murmured. They gave up suffering, but suffering had shaped them. When it was gone, All that remained was longing. They emerged in silence. The vault had revealed no threats. Its message spoke through absence and dust. The city above slept above it still, dreaming on bones that once whispered in smoke. Aldren looked to the horizon. "We have to end this." Thane nodded. "Then we must choose how." Above, the bells gave a single toll, clear and cold. An omen, or an answer. Chapter 13. The Palace of Pale Fire. High above Teralune, where the fog parted like silk around the towers of the Silver Quarter, there stood a house of polished stone and secret vows. The House of Cinderglass wore no banners, bore no herald, and yet every week, cloaked carriages arrived at its gates, unsummoned, silent, and drawn by hungers too refined for the street below. This was no palace of kings. It was a sanctuary for those whose pain had grown elegant and who sought their absolution through perfume, ash, and the illusion of untouched grace. Inside, light hung thick as wine. Amber and violet lamps bled color across walls lacquered in pearl and glass. Music drifted without origin, chimes half heard, voices without tongue. The air trembled with ghostlyly crushed myrrh and the unmistakable drift of slow-burning Kingsbane. There were no thrones here. Many knelt, some on cushions, some in private alcoves veiled with gauze. Their eyes carried the calm of surrender, their posture the ease of those who had unburdened themselves to something unseen. Aldren passed through its threshold unbidden. No steward barred him, no name was asked. The doors gave way like water meeting its source. The ash was everywhere. Displayed in crystal jars, infused into wine, refined into petals for the tongue. Braziers bloomed along the hallways. The marble drank in its scent. They watched him. Their smiles were patient, their gazes quiet with recognition. These were the soothed claimed, perhaps without knowing. A voice met him, smooth as lacquered silk. "You've returned." Valmir of Rel emerged from a curtain of pale flame, robed in silver-threaded azure. His eyes glistened, untouched by weather or time. He carried the stillness of one who had given up the struggle to remember. Aldren did not nod. "Why gather them?" Valmir extended a hand toward the reclining patrons. "They come because memory stings. The ash offers forgetting. Gentle, clean. Here, even the fire grows quiet." Aldren scanned the chamber. "You've built a sanctuary for those who fear the work of healing. They have chosen stillness." At the center of the hall, a wide brazier shimmered. Its flame pulsed in a slow rhythm, like breath drawn in sleep. From its center rose a shape faint as mist and bright with suggestion. Its form resembled a man crowned in filaments of gold. The face wavered, comely, calm, soft along the edges. The scent in the room ripened. Ash folded into sweetness. Resin shifted towards spice. A warmth took hold that loosened the breath. One by one, those present lowered themselves in reverence. They whispered, "Blessed be the flame that lifts." The figure raised a hand. Its gesture was open, inviting. Aldren stared. His thoughts drifted. One way led to rest, the other toward burden remembered. Valmir stepped nearer. "Stay. The ache will leave you. It always does." That is the promise. Aldren's hands closed into fists. "No, pain teaches, and we have laid down too much." The figure in the brazier dimmed. It held its form, as if waiting rather than departing. Aldren turned and walked from the chamber. Behind him came no cries, only the hush of those who had chosen forgetting. On the palace steps, Thane waited beneath the moon. "They've surrendered," Aldren said. "The ash is their scripture now." Thane met his gaze. "Then they will dream through the ruin they invited." Behind them, the House of Cinderglass glowed pale against the dark, a blossom unfolding. a fire that asked softly and took with patience, and within it, a smile waiting to be named. Chapter 14. Breaking the Grin. The sky above Teralune bore no stars that night. Cloud, smoke, or something stranger had veiled them. The moon hung faint behind a veil like boiled glass, its light stretched thin across rooftops and rain-worn spires. The city did not sleep. It listened. In the dross quarter, the children no longer hummed. They sat in circles, eyes wide, breath shallow, as if waiting for a signal none dared speak. In noble houses, servants watched their masters burn incense without purpose, glassy-eyed, mouthing prayers that no temple taught. The streets pulsed with a silence that felt timed, measured, something holding its breath. Aldren and Thane moved through that silence like intruders in a cathedral. They returned to the place where the first ash child had sung, a crumbling tower once used to dry grain, now bare as bone. Inside, they found circles of blackened residue on the floor, bowls carved from charred wood, and wax faces pressed against the walls. Effigies of soot and linen, marked with eyes that had never blinked. A brazier stood at the center, cold. Thane examined it. "This wasn't set by children." "No," Aldren replied. "This was crafted." He stepped back, eyes catching something that did not move, yet waited. Along the rim of the brazier, etched deep into the metal, was a mouth. A smile, broad and patient, its teeth uneven, too many. It curved endlessly across the basin, as if to drink the air. A whisper stirred the dust. It came from all sides and from beneath. I listened. The effigies fell over. The ash in the brazier flared without flame. And in the smoke, faint and hovering, appeared the suggestion of a face, not the full majesty of Grigoril, but a cousin to its hunger. It bore elegance. Its features shimmered like lacquer. Hair fell in perfect symmetry. Its lips were drawn, not cruelly, but knowingly. The grin was thin and unwelcome. Thane raised his lantern. The flame inside bent toward the face, as if drawn by kinship or memory. The face did not recoil. It breathed in the light. "You are seen," Thane whispered. "You have no hold here." "No," the smoke replied, "but they opened the gate." And through it, longing walks. Aldren stepped forward. "What do you want?" The face tilted, graceful. "I offer what none deny. The balm that leaves no mark. The warmth that costs no scar." "You lie," Aldren said. "I reflect." The grin widened. The eyes vanished. The face dissolved back into the smoke. In the aftermath, the brazier cracked down the center. Thane whispered a psalm of warding. Ash curled around their feet like regret unspoken. By morning, 3 districts had gone silent. The watch refused to enter them. Smoke rose from temple chimneys where no fires had been lit, and across the city, mirrors refused to show the living. The grin had entered the streets, and none had yet dared to smile back. Chapter 15. The Ash and the Blade. The city of Teralune stood trembling beneath a breathless sky. The bells no longer rang by human hand. They sounded in the hours when all should rest, tones drawn from unseen ropes, shaped in strange rhythms. The ash had grown bold. It poured from hearths not lit, lingered in the mouths of those who had never touched Kingsbane. Streets swelled with silence. Pain had not vanished. It had been bound, folded beneath the velvet weight of smoke, hidden beneath smiles too calm to be true. In the chamber of the Lantern Order, beneath Thornvale Monastery, the final rite was prepared. Aldren knelt across from Thane, a bowl of silver between them. The water inside was darkened with ink, bloodroot, and the last residue of the blue flame. Floating upon it, a sliver of the ash root's heartwood, carved not with prayers, but with names, names of the healed, the lost, the sung. "If we burn it," Thane said, "we close the gate. If we drink, we pass through it." "And meet what waits," Aldren whispered. They had chosen. Neither had spoken it, but their path led downward. Beneath the reliquary, beneath the bones, beneath even the temple vault where the seven had once knelt, now shattered. There was a chamber beneath even that. Few knew of it. Fewer still had entered and returned. The more. They carried no weapons, only the flame. The descent was not marked by steps, but by forgetting. Stone gave way to salt, salt to ash. Walls turned to flickering shadow. Words grew thin, like breath drawn through cloth. Time scattered. They found the chamber by its breath. Warm air rose steadily from the earth, fragrant with old offerings. The stone glistened with moisture. A circle waited at its heart, drawn in a ring of pale fire that gave off no heat. Inside it, Grigorol, fully formed. Still, watching. No grandeur, no monstrous crown. Only a man seated in silence, robes smooth as oil, eyes glinting with a sorrow too perfect to touch. His smile had not widened. It had settled, as though the work was nearly done. "You came late," he said. "They are nearly finished with wanting." Aldren stepped to the edge of the fire. "They have not chosen. They have been coaxed." "Coaxing is mercy," said the voice. "You knew this once." Thane lit the final taper. The blue flame rose. Its smoke curled inward. "We end this," he said. Grigorol did not move. "You cannot unbuild hunger. You cannot unteach relief." "Then let them remember," Aldren answered. He stepped into the ring. The light surged. The figure of Grigorol blurred. The beauty frayed. Beneath the perfect skin, the fault lines emerged, need layered upon need, a lattice of mirrors all reflecting ache. Aldren stood in the center and offered the heartwood to the flame. The ring closed. Grigorol spoke once more, his voice no longer smooth. "They will curse you." Aldren nodded. "Then they will speak again." He cast the blade, dull, ceremonial, carved from ashroot into the center. Fire swallowed it. A cry rose, but it came from the city above. The gate folded inward. Smoke ceased to rise. And beneath the basilica, the last grin broke. Chapter 16, Where Smoke Does Not Reach Morning, returned. No bells rang to mark it. No incense drifted from the spires. The wind moved again through Teralune streets, lifting the veil of smoke that had once hung like a second sky. Doors opened that had remained shut through months of silence. Windows no longer steamed with resin. The lanterns, long cold in the hands of the common folk, burned once more with clear oil pressed from the earth and not from dreams. In the square of Hollow Saints, children ran beneath a sky that no longer shimmered with ash. Their laughter rose past shuttered balconies and into alleys where grief had settled too long. A game began. Chalk returned to stone. Someone played a flute from an open sill. The house of Cinderglass stood cold. Its walls, which once pulsed with perfumed heat, gave no breath now. The silt veils in its halls had fallen. The braziers, designed not for warmth but for worship, remained unlit. Silence held the rooms, not the weighted kind that stifles, but the hush that follows release. Something had exhaled there and would not return. Aldren awoke in Thornvale beneath a vaulted ceiling of clean stone. A basin of water sat beside him, untouched. The scent of smoke no longer clung to his hair. His limbs ached, his chest was hollow, his fingers bore the tremble of one who had survived cost. Across from him, Brother Thane watched. "It is done," Aldren murmured. Thane did not answer immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the horizon, where rooftops cast long shadows across the thinning fog. "They will ask again," he said. "Perhaps not now. But when grief returns, when pain presses too deep, they may seek the smoke." "Then we leave them a choice," Aldren replied. That afternoon, they descended the high paths, not to return to vaults. They stepped into the living stone of the city, where merchants scrubbed ash from thresholds, and physicians opened shutters without fear. The scent of bread carried from ovens long silent. They passed the street of white thorns, signs still tilted in rusted hinges. But the red nails, those marks of abandonment, had been pulled. In one house, a boy stood at the window, holding a mirror to the sun. His face, for the first time, showed no flicker of otherness, only himself. By the canals, where water once mirrored flame, the brazier they had feared lay in ruin. Cracked metal, a basin no longer suited for burning. Flowers had been placed there, laurel, ivy, a single violet sprig. Aldren paused at the fountain. Jaren sat nearby, his legs tucked beneath him, chalk in hand. His mother sat beside him, eyes watchful, hands steady on his back. Sister Elva stood at a distance, watching, guarding. Jaren drew. The tree took shape slowly, trunk tall, branches lifted in quiet defiance. Its roots did not coil, they spread. Aldren knelt. He added a single line with his fingertip. No words were spoken. At dusk, the monastery bell tolled once. The sound rolled through the high quarters and into the broken stone of the lower wards. It lingered, a clear tone, a reminder. Thane lit his lantern one final time. The blue flame rose within the glass as if recognizing its bearer. He stepped onto the highest stair of Thornvale and held the lantern aloft. Its light spread across the terraces, reaching even the ruined domes where incense had once ruled. He spoke aloud, his voice steady. The demon was not conquered. It was heard. It was denied the altar. And it has no name here. Aldren stood beside him. In his hand, the final jar of Kingsbane resin. He unsealed it. The scent rose faintly, sweet, familiar. He turned the jar and cast its contents into the wind. What scattered did not shimmer. It did not fall. It dissolved. Far beneath Teralune, in a chamber where roots once drank grief, a silence held. The walls no longer breathed. The air no longer trembled with longing. The soot had settled. The figures of stone no longer watched. Upon the basin, someone had drawn a line. Just one. Let the pain be shared. It bore no signature, only a quiet kind of courage. Above, in the high towers, the bells rang once more. This time, the sound carried not from fear or warning. It carried from breath, and breath, at last, had returned to the living.